Okay, well, welcome to Chapter 2. So Chapter 2 gets into CSS, which is a cascading style sheets. And one thing I really want to stress right off the bat is there are three variations of the cascading style sheet. We have what is called linked, which is a separate file altogether. We have embedded, and then we have what is called inline. So when you have a linked style sheet, think of that as the high level. And then if you do embedded, embedded will always override the linked style sheet. And inline will basically override embedded. So if you have an inline, that will override embedded and the linked. And we'll see what those examples are in here in just a second. So basically, so here on this page we have a P. We're going to say we want to style a P tag. So if you use a P tag, it will always have this style, have a background color of that. If I created an H2 tag style, I could actually say H2 and then say what the color is. Now the thing about that is anytime I use an H2 tag, it will always be that color. And here is a table column. It will have a background color of red. Okay, so CSS hooks. So it says here there are other more complex selectors that build on a generic selector, which is this table down here. The generic selector, along with the class and ID selectors, will probably be reasonably familiar. So what we're able to do is we're able to create what is called a class tag or an ID tag. An ID tag is made more for one item, and a class can be used for multiple items. That's really pretty much the difference between them, but they're used pretty much the same, except one uses the word class, one uses the word ID, one uses an asterisk, one uses a pound sign. So if I were to come in here and say footer block quote P, that means that we're going to have a tag called footer, and it's going to use, whenever you use a block quote or a P, or if you use a block quote and a paragraph inside of a footer, it will basically have that color. A child selector applies a style to an element that's a direct descendant of a parent child. So if I have an anchor tag, a link tag inside of a UL, an unordered list, that will have a specific style as well. If I use an A tag anywhere else, it will not get that style. But if I use an anchor tag inside of an unordered list, yes, it will have that style. An adjacent sibling selector. It says needs two selectors, an originator and a target separated by plus sign. In this example, the CSS rule says apply a text indent to a paragraph only if there is a paragraph element immediately before that. So meaning if I have a paragraph inside of a paragraph, have this style. Okay, that could really be a paragraph inside of an unordered list. But anyway, so basically what it says when you have that particular element inside of another element, it will have that particular style. A general sibling selector is similar to an adjacent sibling selector in that it needs two selectors, an originating and a target. The selectors are separated by a tilde and can be applied to one or more target elements. Unlike the adjacent, the plus sign, in this example, if there is more than a one block quote after an H1 tag, each block quote displays text as bold. So what they're saying is, if I have a block quote inside of an H1 tag, if I have multiple, so this one up here, it's only going to be the first paragraph inside of a paragraph. So if I have another paragraph inside of that paragraph, it will only take effect to the first paragraph. If I use a tilde, though, that says all elements, all block quote elements inside of the H1 tag. An attribute selector uses an attribute to an attribute value to determine where a CSS rule gets applied. In this example, only form input set to a value of text gets a yellow background. So if I have an input parameter inside of a form, and it's a text, it will have a background of yellow. Any other input will have no background. So let's take a look at the first example. And so go to chapter 2, go to the first example, and here we have a celebrated jumping frog of Calvert County. And here it's basically got a background color. We can see we got a graphic in there. Again, if I do a right click and view the page source, there we can see that we have a doc type. We have our HTML. Now notice we have a thing called language EN. EN is short for English. ES is short for Spanish. And the list goes on from there. That's really not needed. It's really not a necessary requirement. We have our head tag, and then we have a meta tag telling us what our character set's going to be. So when we use our typography, we'll get in that in chapter 3, we're going to tell it that we're using this UTF-8, which is kind of a more US driven kind of a typography that basically is used probably more in the Western Hemisphere. So we got a title called The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calvert County, so that's going to be the name of, so right up here, notice our tag up here, the celebrated blah, 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 blah. So that's going to show up at the top and our tag at the top. Here we're telling it we're going to use a style sheet. Now this is using what's called a linked style sheet. We're telling it that this style sheet is called style.css. Since there's nothing in front of it, it's expecting that file to be in the same place as this guy. And if I look, notice I've got index and there is my style.css. So those two files are in the same exact place, meaning they are going to, it's expecting it to be in the same place. So, should say same path. Again, this is the requirements for setting that up. We have REL style sheet. We're telling what that is. This is a style sheet, and what type of style sheet is. It's a textual style sheet. And /CSS. That's the end of our head. We now go into our body. I've got an H1 tag. Now, before we continue, let's take a look at this style sheet. So the style sheet basically says our body is going to have a background color of that, which is that dark green. The width is only going to be 600 pixels. So we're only going to have this be as wide as 600 pixels, and our margin is going to be 15 pixels, meaning the margin from the top, bottom, left, and right. Since we didn't specify a margin, that's the margin all the way around. So none of our text will get closer than 15 pixels. All of our paragraphs will have a font of Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. Sans Serif means it has no little tags. So if you remember with Roman Times New Roman, like the T, the letter T has a kind of a little tag at the bottom. When it comes down, it's got a little tag at the bottom. Well, sans serif says we don't want to use that. Our font size is going to be 14 pixels. Our color is going to be 00000, which is black. And our text indent is 10 points, meaning indent N 10 pixels for each paragraph. All of our H1 tags will have these qualities. All of our H2 tags will have these. Our image, if we do use an image tag, it will basically have a padding of 3 pixels, have that kind of a background. So I believe it's the same as our body. Nope, it's different. It's got a color and it basically says float right. Float right says float to the right and stay there. Don't ever come back this way. And the text will kind of form itself around that tag, or that image. All of our owner of the list will have those properties. All of our links will have those properties. So getting back to our code then, this is, you'll notice we've got our margins top to left, right. Notice it's only 600 pixels wide. Our picture floats to the right, so any text that comes up to it will basically kind of form itself around it. It does have padding, meaning there is a little gap between the text and the picture. There, notice there's a little tiny, I don't know if that's the background color, but anyways, we basically told it that the color of the background. There is our link, our A, there is our H1 tag. I don't know if we have any H2 tags, but notice that our index has no styling in it at all. None. So that means it's going to basically it's going to look for the style sheet to give it its styling. And since it's a link style sheet, it's going to go to that file and basically apply all that styling to all of the H1, the unordered lists, H1 tags. Is there any H2? I don't think there is. I think that's about it. But the body, it tells it the body will have this. So all of the body will have that certain feature. Now, one thing I could do is I could come in here and click within my body. And I'm going to open this up in Notepad. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say body. So I'm going to say style equals double quote, and inside there I'm going to come in here and say this. That is going to be the background color of white. So now if I save this and I come back over here to the and I do a refresh, notice what it did to the background color. Now again, like I said in the beginning, that's called an inline style sheet. That overrides everything else. So overrode an embedded, it overrode a linked. In this case, it overwrote the linked. So even though I have a certain style, I can override it when I need to. So again, if I were to go back into here and remove that, then it will go ahead and apply the style sheet of the linked style sheet. So when I do a refresh, boom, it's back to the background green color. Okay, so